We've got From Ship to Shore, Rum and Cocktail Culture with our guests Jessica Yen Manzey from the United States Bartenders Guild. We've got Paul McFadyen from Plantation Rum, and we've got Gergö Muráth from Worthy Park and Trailer Happiness. Welcome, everyone. How are we doing?
Yay, we're on.
Yes.
Hello.
I can see you guys voting slowly.
Long-time listener.
Guys, welcome to our social bubble.
Hello.
Guys, we've got this. Me, Serge, and Jess are going to do the next 8.5 hours. We've got this. Like, you guys.
I just like to say,
like, we got this.
I'd just like to start by thanking you guys, because not only did you put me on a session right after 3 of the leading women in rum, but also my actual boss. You know, and it's not a problem, because in the session before it was my other actual boss. So no pressure there.
Well, we believe in you, Sergio. There's nothing that a good meme can't fix. So
I believe in rum.
We were saying in the chat before we came on, you should just mix the rum and bubbles. Follow your heart.
Mix it.
I did want. Okay.
Are we gonna do it?
Hold on.
I'm
I'm gonna get a glass. I'm gonna get a glass just in case it goes horribly pear-shaped.
Come on.
Okay, no, don't do it all in one, because we'll be upset if it doesn't work.
Come on, Don. It's
No,
okay.
Mitch.
It's not.
Mitch,
It's literally not even the craziest thing we'll do this hour.
It's called mixology. Just go with it.
Look at that. It looks magical already.
Where are your rums?
Don is
Get
so... This is such the worst thing that could ever happen to a master of wine.
It kind of smells like Riesling.
Ooh, carbonated rum. Quickly trademark it.
What a treat.
It's a crocodile pig.
Hot new release.
I can already see Mario commenting. So Mario is right in the next room. This is the rummiest house in London, and we've got Joe Farr coming in very soon as well. Like,
guys, do you have any idea what you've done today? Like, I think I've watched like most of the hours today, and I have been in awe. Like, you know how much I love you guys anyway, but like what you've accomplished today is like proper amazing. Like, particularly from where I come from, like. Because when I started out in rum, there was like 20 of us around the world on a little web-based forum, Ministry of Rum, like just a bunch of nerds sort of exchanging misinformation and trying to get producers to give us, producers, even when I was working with Wurzburg, trying to get producers to give us the basic information was a real challenge, because they were old school. It's like, there are secrets, we don't share them. And if you told us then that this kind of forum, this kind of family, this kind of community would be getting together and exchanging this incredible depth, like it would have blown me away, exactly like it has done today. Like, you guys have achieved something really special.
Well, thank you. Well, we haven't finished it yet, but thank you.
I told you, we believe in you. We believe in you, and that's what matters.
It might get more special as we go.
We do want to start though. We want to open the session appropriately, because it is somebody's birthday here today.
Are we singing?
We're gonna sing "Happy Birthday" to Jessica. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jessica. Happy birthday to you.
I think I'm going to stick to rum rather than singing.
Joining us on your birthday.
Well, thank you for inviting me to do this on my birthday. We here in the United States have been pretty locked down for a very long time. So this is actually very festive for considering, you know, the weeks and weeks of no bars and very little rum.
Well, we're hoping to bring that rum back with a force, with a gusto today. So, don't worry, we've got lots planned. And Sergio, how are you doing out there? You're one of the people in the UK staying up the latest with us tonight.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I'm on the session with someone from the West Coast, and then somebody else from the West Coast, going again in the next session, going against my own wife, Chucky. I know she's watching. We'll see how that one goes, but so far I'm holding up well. it's I've been watching as much as I could. It's amazing. I realized I should have asked for tomorrow off instead of today. I could have just finished my shift and done this. But at least I get to host you guys tomorrow when you stumble into trailer for drinks at 1.
Yes, if there's any chance you could open up at like 10, that would be amazing. Just so we can roll straight out.
10.
Oh, you know what? When we finish the 4:30 session, I'll just come to Park Royale and I'll bring the key.
Done. Done.
We'll just meet you there. Easy. Chucky says final boss. Yes, I love it. All right, so today we're gonna dive into some chat about Navy Rum blends, cocktails, look at some of the myths, look at some of the legends, see what's bullshit, see what's not, and how that translates into today. So to start
bullshit
off with,
in rum, impossible.
That never happens.
That was going to be my screen name.
I used to use that when I was 23 years old. Sorry, when I said I was 23 years old.
So let's start off. We have these stories of the old Drakes and early daiquiri versions being made on ships. Was that really happening? Were there sailor bartenders going around the world squeezing limes and shaking daiquiris, or is that sort of what's our take on all that?
I mean, people always go, oh yeah, they did it to prevent scurvy. But if they really wanted to prevent scurvy, they probably wouldn't have given the option to change your salt and bread for lime and sugar, because you got one or the other. You were either eating or you were drinking a daiquiri. It wasn't just, oh, we're going to hand out lime and the first mate and our bartender is going to serve you these very, very complicated drinks. It was probably an extremely minimal amount, and really it didn't come into fashion until after they realized how to preserve them as well, because we know one of the reasons they turned to spirits on ships was because they could preserve it. But do you think they could preserve, lime juice better than they could preserve water or beer or anything else? I mean, it doesn't seem all that likely.
Yeah, and the whole notion of pirates drinking rum, lime, sugar, water, effectively drinking daiquiris, like as we know they did. Like if it was really a daiquiri institution, there'd be more pirate-themed coupettes.
Well, now I want the pirate-themed coupette.
Yeah. Well, you've got to start trademarking these things. My best ideas come about right in the morning.
I kind of appreciate that the roots took place by necessity on boats, though. It's kind of cool, like how the roots of sushi were preserving the fish with vinegar and having it with rice on boats when people were out, so that the fish didn't spoil. And that, generations and generations later gives us nigiri. I think that as like a spiritual ancestor to today's daiquiri, like it's a cute story.
I think you've just said the magic word, Jessica. Dawn's favorite food is sushi.
And daiquiri.
You're in.
Yeah, the daiquiris are her favorite. And confirm.
Mine too. So, yeah.
I was just trying to find a sushi restaurant that was open.
I don't know.
Open at 1:38.
I mean, to follow on from your question though, like in the early days of ration was like a purely functional thing, like keep people drunk, get calories in their system, that sort of stuff. But the reason why I was so desperate to do this session and why I was so excited, Mitch, this is a drum and banging for such a long time that, like, underpinning the whole rum blending is like a wonderful framework that informs us today and informed the original tiki artists about how you understand rum flavors and put them together to create something that's greater than some of its parts. And that's why I was so happy to be with Jessica and Serge to chat about this, because there's an underpinning there that you guys have touched upon in a lot of your sessions, but that we're going to absolutely drill into the ground over the course of the next 8.5 hours.
Yeah, it's really strange that, whenever we talk about original tiki recipes, we talk about specifics of something like a Don's mix or Don spice and so on. But beyond just mentioning Jamaican and Puerto Rican and Demerara, and the Demerara we know it was Lemon Hot 151, but we don't know about the other components, and everybody just kind of glosses over that. The only one I can think of really was trying to recreate a flavor blend that would simulate what Vic used in the Mai Tai. But everything else, we just kind of go, oh yeah, a Jamaican and a Puerto Rican, and don't
you've just hit the
dig
nail
any
on the
deeper
head.
than that.
You've just hit the nail on the head. Like I've listened to lots of sort of learning people today, and quite rightly talking about the need for rum to talk about categorization on where it comes from or how it's made. The way I've always come at it, because I've spent the last 20 years just sort of engaging with consumers, it's like, to me, the biggest impediment for the rum industry moving forward is that, like, in terms of how a consumer experiences it, it doesn't matter whether or not it's a pot or column still. What it matters about is what it tastes like. In the same way that, I think of it in terms of like an artist with paints. It doesn't matter what dyes and copper sulfate used to create that red. What matters is how vivid the red is and how you would use it. And the fact that if you put red and yellow together, you don't get a red and yellow mix, you get orange. And that's the thing that if we went out on the street now and you asked, obviously not right now, but at a more reasonable hour, and you asked people who are whiskey drinkers, and you asked them what an Islay malt tastes like, what's going to be the words they're immediately going to repeat?
Smoky.
Peaty.
Smoky, peaty.
Like, people understand what an Islay malt tastes like. One of the big impediments in the rum industry is that there is a tiny small percentage of people that could tell you, what does a St. Lucian rum taste like? What does a Grenadian rum taste like? What does a Guyanese rum taste like? And so, good point, Sean. Like, until you understand where rums sit in terms of their flavors in relation to each other, you haven't really got mastery of how to then use them, but also how to sell them as customers.
Yeah, but what they taste like is informed by the process that they are created by.
Of course,
you know, but
that's almost the cause. Like, whereas what I'm saying is the effect, as in what you're delivering to the customer, is much more important, because the fact that something comes from a pot still doesn't necessarily, it gives you some information, but we can create pot still rums that taste like column still rums and vice versa. It doesn't really give you the be all and end all of tools, and it also, just talking about where it comes from, you and I could go over, and Jessica could go over old Trader Vic and Donna Beachcomber recipes, and it will say a Demerara rum or a Jamaican rum, but that only gives us an idea, because there are different Jamaican rums, different Demerara rums, different rums from Puerto Rico, for example, and without the sort of emphasis on where it comes from and how it's made, it takes preeminence in this industry when flavor is what's really important, and that's
at the end of the day, obviously. But
sorry, I feel like those things are really important as kind of indications of what it's going to taste like. When we talk
100%.
about educating the consumer,
yeah,
people will walk into a bar with a selection of rums and have no idea what's in front of them. And the people who are more game to try, who are like really excited to like try a new spirit and learn about it, I find it to be a really helpful tool to give them like, hey, like, what did you used to drink? What do you tend to enjoy on your own? And then sort of giving them a translation, something that they can use going forward. Like, cool, you like that rum I just gave you? You're super into like funky, you like heavier flavors, you like pot stills, you like something a little bit bigger. And that person can then go out and be like, okay, well, she told me I like pot stilled stuff. I like that thing from Jamaica. I can go out armed with that tiny bit of information, and, you know, it opens up a little part of that world to them.
You are so right. I mean, you're absolutely right. Obviously, it gives you that indicator. Like, what it needs to be married with is what's the benefit. Like, that's almost the features of the product, rather than the benefit, what it is to the consumer.
But there's a very clear benefit talking about production, because if you think about whiskey drinkers, there's a lot more people who drink whiskey than who necessarily understand whiskey. And there's a lot of people who will come to you, and I know this from, you know, serving lots of people in bars. There's a lot of people who will come to you and ask for a single malt because they associate it with a certain level of quality because of the way it's made. They might be completely unable to tell you what single malt means, but they understand that there's an inherent quality to it. And I think categorizing by production process is relevant in the sense that it will give you a baseline value system, not necessarily in terms of how good that tastes or how much you will like it, but it will give you an idea of what it is.
And I think we're in total agreement. We've had this conversation with quite a lot of Serge. Like, I suppose what I'm saying that's not married with is a common language for how that experience then translates to the customer. So how would you summarize Barbados rum? As in, it's difficult to do broad generalizations because Barbados rum can be light column still or heavy pop, but a broad generalization for Barbados is not common even amongst the high-end set that have been sitting here all day watching for 24 hours. Unlike the fact that everyone can describe what an Isle malt tastes like, and everyone can taste what a more corn-heavy bourbon tastes like, or any of those kind of things, because there's a common language to describe the experience for the customer.
And I think we're touching on something really interesting here, which again is an area I really want to dig in with you guys, because the connotations around a rum blend are completely different to any other spirit in the world. You know, there is no spirit in the world that blends together different countries to create flavor profiles the way rum does. You know, no one's ever gone out. Well, most people haven't gone out and had a 3 gin martini or a 4 whiskey old fashioned, but we've all had 5 rum, 6 rum, like all different types of rums blends together. And the
made,
word blend,
not even had, made
with champagne.
Like,
Hell yeah.
I'm pretty sure one of our guests later on is Burrow Bar from Australia, and you know, I remember distinctly one night thinking it was a good idea to have like 12 or 13 runs. Like, let's really go out there. You know, it's like this is inherent in rum culture to blend flavors together, to blend rums together, but and it breaks apart from the rest of the spirits categories, where it's not just a blend of pot and column that we're talking about, or it's not just a blend of different distilleries from the same locale, but it's a far-reaching blend. Like, that term can be applied to so many things. And
well, of course,
well, yeah, but
Jessica, stop, right? But Jessica, you touched on a really interesting point where a customer could come in and, you know, have no idea we're bringing in megaphone out. It's been decided this is a megaphone session.
Excellent.
We're keeping you guys in track. Jessica, you mentioned a really interesting point where you said, you know, customers will come in and they will look at a bar and they'll have no idea what's up to them, and depending on how open they are will determine what they can drink. But, you know, why is rum blending so different? Why is the connotation so different? And when, you know, I know your former background was working at Rum Bar in Seattle, one of the world's famous rum bars, you know, like, how did you get customers to understand and to break over that sort of threshold of knowing, okay, this is what I'm having and this is what this blend represents?
I don't know if I had a ton of conversations with guests about blends necessarily, but one of the things that I found was kind of instrumental in engaging guests with a style of rum they'd never had before, which was most of them for a lot of our guests, was how they're utilized in a cocktail, which does highlight the blend. So you talk to a guest, what kind of drink do you want? Do you want something that's kind of bright and citrusy? Do you want something that's stirred down, spirit forward? Are you looking for something with a ton of bitter? Do you like something tropical? And then from there, they're going to choose a menu cocktail that features a blend of rums that highlights that style of drink. So now they've ordered something and, you know, they wanted something really bright, clean, and simple. And, you know, if they're curious and, you know, they want to go further, like, oh, I really like this. What else can I have that's along these lines? And then, you know, you're letting them know, well, you know, the rums that you had in there were, you know, Barbados and Puerto Rico. And, you know, we can continue along those lines. You know, if you like things kind of light and dry. And that's where the rum blend comes together with the way that the guest is experiencing it. And, you know, you come away with a teachable moment.
I love that. How good's that? Boys, can you top that? What's that?
I mean, as to why rum blending is, to go back to what you asked, as to why rum blending is different to any other spirit, is because rum has a much wider and richer variety in
100%.
the sense that people always just talk about rum. People always, when they talk about whiskey, they tend to talk about American whiskey and Irish whiskey and Japanese whiskey and so on. But when they talk about rum, it's always just rum. So of course you can blend it because you have all these different countries with all their different traditions in terms of what flavor profile they produce or how they do it or what they make. And in fact, what we're expecting from them. You have a certain idea about a heavy, high rum. You know what you're expecting it to taste like, and if it doesn't taste like that, you almost go, "Wait a minute, what is this?" So the reason why blending in rum is much more common than any other spirit, really, is because we don't talk about rum in the regional sense that we talk about a lot of other spirits. Nobody talks about brandy in general. They talk about Armagnac and Cognac and Pisco. Same with whiskey, as I mentioned before. Rum you can blend because people don't necessarily recognize that all of these different rums are made in wildly different ways because of wildly different traditions. And as to the the blends with 15, 16, 17, however many rums, it gets to a point when it doesn't make sense. Why are you doing that blend? What flavors are you trying to select? What are you trying to highlight? What are you trying to build? The classic zombie blend works the way it does because it's 3 very, very different rums bringing 3 very different things to the table, and none of them are overlapping. You'll inevitably get into overlapping flavors if you use too many. I mean, Paul can talk about the design of the OFTD and a whole lot of marks that they had to go through to find ones where they were all matching with each other. And I'm sure that Black Dot went through a very, very similar process in its creation of having to taste a million delicious rums until you could settle on a consistent one that made sense.
Well, one of those jobs you really drag out a little bit longer. We'll taste a couple more.
It's not quite there.
Yes, like Serge just hit the nail on the head. That like in answer to your question, that the rum flavor spectrum dwarfs every other category by an enormous magnitude. That even if you took the entirety of whiskey, from a delicate floral Japanese to a slap you in the face with peat and smoke Isla to a really sweet bourbon like the heavy corn bias, that's quite a wide spectrum. We're talking about a category that has agricoles and cachaças and clarins in one end of vegetal expressions to literally to the degree of neutrality and stretching the definition of rum at one end in the same category with heavy pot still ester rich or volatile alcohol, high alcohol rich stuff from Demerara or Fiji or somewhere like and of course the rum blender's skill. I work for a cognac house, obviously, that do a lot of rum blending, and so I've been sort of steeped in how you create something using components to create something that's greater than some of its parts. The whole French notion of assemblage, where you take stuff that may be different, but when they're combined, what you've created is something that isn't just a list of the things you put in. What you've created is something which is unique in its own right.
No, and that's again a really great point. And all of you guys have worked in amazing rum bars or do work in amazing rum bars, and it's interesting to me how these bars for me are the forefront of sort of educating people about those individual provenances, like outside of say people who are buying bottles to have on their home bar or doing their own research. A lot of people, certainly for myself and a lot of people I know, discover rum through places like Trailer Happiness, places like Rum Bar in Seattle. It's like they stumble upon this bar that's completely different to every other place they've ever walked into, and they're like, what is this? What's going on? And you have this sort of almost a responsibility to introduce them to the world of rum and give them a good impression so that they come back, so that they stay in the rum camp rather than going back to the safe whiskey or gin camps, So Jessica, again, coming back to yourself, where would you take someone who is discovering rum for the first time? Let's say you have that person comes into a rum bar back in the day, or if you were speaking to someone about rum for the first time and you were, maybe they weren't that experienced with it, where would you be taking them? Do you have a favorite place you like to start them off? Do you have, what's your introduction into rum?
I honestly like to start just with where the guest is going to be more comfortable. That's why one of my favorite questions, and this works with any spirit category, this works with wine, is what do you like to drink? Like, don't think about rum, don't think about where we are. What do you like to sit down with? And, if people tell you they like bourbon, that's going to give you an idea. Like, okay, they like something smooth. They like something maybe like on the sweeter end. They're going to want something with age on it. If they tell you, oh, I'm really into mezcal these days, that you can probably be a little bit more adventurous in what you recommend to them. And, when I worked with a lot of rums, I had like a little flow chart in my mind of like, okay, they said this, I'm going to take them to this category. I'm going to let them try this thing. If they like that, I know where I can go from there. And, because I'm me, I would want to push them. Like, what is the weirdest thing that I can give them that they're going to be really excited about? Because my favorite thing about serving a guest is having them go, what was that? Like, I love that look because it's what my favorite rums do to me.
And that's there's one of the things that Dawn mentioned earlier as well, was like talking about, asking people what they like to drink, what their flavors are, getting them into that place, making them feel comfortable with that. I think that's, it's so important. It's one of the funniest things that I think we've all seen online. You get the rum forums and someone's just started drinking the rum. They're like, oh, I really like Diplomatico. And it's like, great, now drink some overproof cast strength.
That's
like,
right.
Yeah.
Like, no, like, absolutely, you'll scare them off.
Jessica's response is perfect. Like my answer now, having spent like ages dealing with customers, is always really similar to Jessica's. I just say, what's your favorite cocktail you've ever had in your life? Where were you? What was the experience? What's the best down drink you've ever had? What's your favorite spirit? Because if you can key into people's passion and excitement, A, it's informative, B, it's a great way to engage with people. And it gives you all the clues you need to then take them on that journey. And Jessica, you touched on like a really important thing. Like, you talked about your mental framework of how you sort of categorize things. And Mitch, that's something I've spent a lot of time sort of working on. I talked earlier about, I think there are 3 distinctly different styles of rum, like really neutral, like, so right up to 95 or 90% ABV. So therefore, in terms of positive terms, they're crisp, dry, elegant, short on the palate, aperitif style rums. Another extreme is, look, I was selling it hard. And across that border, of course, is vodka. But you can go right up to that limit. Then you've got vegetal, raw expressions of the sugarcane itself, so agricoles, cachaças, clarins, that really capture like the sunlight and the soil and the earth and the rainfall in those countries, where you can taste like you're standing in those cane fields. And then the other sort of extreme is that heavy pot still, full of esters, full of higher alcohols. Like they're sort of undeniably your 3 distinctly different styles of rum. And then every other sort of bottle you pick up can be mapped somewhere within that. So I always think like a really balanced, composed, not too heavy, not too light, not too sweet, not too dry, pot column still Bayesian rum kind of sits somewhere in the middle of that. And sort of having that framework in my head always helps me understand that if let's say you taste this rum, if it wasn't perfect for you, but based on your feedback, I'd know where to take you moving within that framework, because I kind of have that. It was really interesting hearing Jessica say that, like having it, because of course that framework is something that, like Mitch, like you and I like have used and like chatted about loads.
And I think like bartender that works with, more adventurous spirits goes through that. Like, you think where you're channeling a guest, and, ideal situation, you put something in front of them and they're like, this is the thing I've been waiting my whole life to drink. Opposite side of that, I many times have set something down in front of the guests and they're like, that sucks. And I'm like, cool. Well, you know what? I feel
Okay.
personally really hurt by this, but let's go in another direction. And like, process of elimination is good too.
I kind of do a combination of your two approaches. I tend to, if it's somebody sitting at the bar who's clearly interested, I start with a flight. I start with a flight of going through normally 4 or 5 different rum styles, short pours, 10, 15 mils, aka about a third of an ounce to maybe half ounce. But I try to introduce them to various historically relevant styles. And then if there's a particular favorite they have, then we can go in that direction. Otherwise, obviously, if it's busy and they just want a one-off, then Jessica's approach is absolutely something I myself use a lot. What it is that you already like, what it is that you're already after. Or the other thing I tend to ask, and this especially goes for cocktails but rums as well, is what do you not like? If I know that somebody despises really fruity sweet things, then there's a certain amount of rums that are already off. Or if somebody really, really doesn't like very austere, very dry, very sort of challenging flavors, then that again knocks out certain things. And I have a better chance of recommending something that they're going to enjoy, especially from such a vast variety of rums that we're blessed to have in trailer.
Well, exactly. I suppose my sort of bigger point coming out of exactly what both Jessica and Serge just said, once you sort of understand where rums sit in relation to each other, then you can understand why the naval rum blends are constructed the way they are, why we built OFTD the way we did, why a William George was built the way it is, or 3 stars, or even bring it back to, because Serge is my big passion. If you go through Don and Trader's classic recipes where they took individual island components and created something greater than the sum of its parts, because there are standard formulas you can apply. I mean, if you take a Never Say Die, a Pearl Diver's Punch, like an Aku Aku Lapu, but you could carry on down the list of old sort of Don, Trader and their predecessors ilk. The standard formula that is then echoed in pretty much every rum blend that's been launched is to take a column still rum. So Puerto Rican would be the most common in America, obviously. So you take that elegant, dry, short on the palate rum, which provides structure. We use a Trinidadian rum for that in 3 stars, for example. Then you accent it with a heavy modifier from either a pot still Pourmorant or a Jamaican rum. But then you need a bridging component to kind of bring that together to create some harmony, rather than just having 2 disparate components. And so in today's market, you might take a Barbados, for example, but because Barbados wasn't really exporting in the 30s, 40s, 50s, what would typically be quoted in Don and Trader's recipes would be like a Demerara rum. So they're a blend of the pot and columns. And so once you've got a column, a pot column, you create something that's bigger than some of its parts. And I suppose the bigger point I'm trying to make is until you understand that kind of, back to Jessica and Sergio's original point, you need to understand how the rum's made. My kind of point, you need to understand what it tastes like and what the flavors are. But once you master those 2 things, then you can use the broad palette that rum has at its disposal to create something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And that's where the original tiki artists painted beautiful frescoes, because they understood the paints they were working with and created texture and stuff. And it underpins most of the new rum brands that have launched.
So this is something that Paul and I discussed in a few texts before the session, and this is where we actually disagree to a point. I completely agree. I agree on bottled. When it comes to bottled rum blends, you absolutely have the lighter, a column, a pot and column blend makes complete sense. But when it comes to tiki blends, there's a very, very specific style of Guyanese rum they were using. And that would have been Lemon Hunt 151, which is extremely heavy, not to mention extremely high ABV. So the reason why, in the classic zombie blend, you had 1.5 parts to 1 part, is because it was such a large amount of such a huge alcoholic punch and such an overwhelming, big, oily, fusily, chocolatey, smoky flavor
No
coming
time
off of the
happens, yeah.
Demerara that would, almost necessarily dominate in a bottled blend, as shown off by a few bottled blends that build on this as a central component. And I think that is slightly different to how you would have a pot and column to almost sort of temper or create a midpoint in your blend when you're bottling for
But
balance.
that's the only point of our disagreement. That like there's quite a few classic tiki rum blends that will specify 2 different Demerara rums, quite a lot of them, because I think it's safe to say that not all Demerara rums was just Lemon 151. When we've got a company that has a broad array of stills at its disposal, from column stills right through to that old double wooden pot, single wooden pot, for example. And so it kind of underpins my point that we're trying to like create insight into what Don's recipe was in 1939 for a particular cocktail where he just said use a Demerara rum. The fact that it comes from Demerara gives us some insight, but it doesn't really tell us exactly what the Demerara was, because it could have gone in a number of different directions. And so you're trying to pass information and make assumptions without having the entire story.
It kind of makes me think of how I've read about how composers back like super classical music days would write things and you weren't necessarily sure how it would sound, especially with vocal arrangements, or when certain things were lost about, like, we don't know how fast this was, or we didn't know how this instrument sounded back then. Rum blends, the way that they're written, or even like recipes where it gives you like every component and it just says rum, or it just says Demerara rum. I can't be the only one who's made a classic recipe from like the 1940s and been like, this is whack. This is completely out of
yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
but
You could go one of two ways with that. You could think like they didn't know how to make drinks back then. Their mouths were broken. Or you could think they were probably working with a different product.
If you make drinks in a Savoy cocktail book, you'll assume that their mouths were broken.
Right. There's a ton of that going on. And I think really it kind of underpins the importance of blending in like the modern rum cocktail world, because you're like, okay, cool. We know 3 of the 4 elements of this drink. The only one that's not working is the rum that we don't have. What can we put together to make this drink work? And I think that's really exciting. It's one of the fun things about working with a spirit category where you can bring in so many different elements by just blending different rums together. It's a really cool effect that you have once you've been like, okay, well, let's bring this in and see how it changes. And at the end of the day, you might have 3 drinks that worked and they all just work in different ways.
That's perfect. Like and sort of stemming from that like, so Serge, like sort of making assumptions about what that Demerara styles were, looking back at the drinks from the 30s and 40s, that if you put a light Puerto Rican like neutral rum right now with a heavy Jamaican Demerara, those 2 rums don't act in harmony. Like that just independent of like, if you just take that and say like you haven't got a harmonious blend, there's got to be a bridging component so the column still rum that acts as a framework that accentuates the modifier of the heavy rum and needs some balance to bridge the gap. And so therein lies those assumptions. But Jessica, as she's done for the house, just put it better than I did. So.
I mean, the mere fact that you had the same amount of the light Puerto Rican and the Jamaican already tells you that they must have been fairly different, because these days, if you were constructing a blend with a light component, you would immediately use a much larger amount of it, because otherwise it would be almost non-existent in terms of flavor.
That's the whole point. There's no harmony. Like if you just did heavy Jamaica and Puerto Rican, the Puerto Rican doesn't bring anything to the mix.
Yeah, it would get eaten alive.
It just gets eaten alive. Like you're literally just adding alcohol, and that's why like now we know about how putting together blends, and part of that's the legacy of naval rum blends. part of that's the legacy of the tiki artist. And part of that's the fact that there was so many new rum brands launched in market that I've been, quite a few of them I've been involved in. So if you look at what we did with 3 Stars, just without turning it into a brand thing. Sorry, I work.
Brandy thing.
But the Trinidadian rum is very delicate, crisp component that would just get lost because it's there with some 12-year-old Jamaican rum, some heavy pot still. Without the Barbados rum to sort of bridge that gap with the pot column and provide harmony that literally the Trinidadian rum wouldn't bring anything to the table at all. And that same framework that is exhibited all over the tiki history and all over pretty much every rum blend. That's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. This is really exciting. As Jessica said, this is really exciting as bartender. It's really exciting as someone who loves rum. This you don't get this in the other spirit category.
Yeah. Dawn keeps disappearing.
So,
anytime it comes back to you guys, Dawn is somewhere else.
Maybe she found some 1:30 a.m. sushi.
She should have that. Oh yeah.
we get Robin. She's she's saving Batman for the real heavy hitters. We're talking heavy hitters. I put on a lot of weight during lockdown.
Yeah, I'm a heavy hitter. That's for sure. Yeah.
Let's not talk
a lot
about
more heavy than I was.
We're gonna move swiftly past that question. So a question here from Letty and Gareth from the Rumheads, saying if a rum novice beginner came into a bar, would you start at Bajan rum and then go from there based on feedback? I know that's something I've done personally in the past. Where for each of you is your start point in the Caribbean or further afield? Where would you start people on their rum journey?
That's I mean, that's probably there's something like it might have heard me bang that drum for a while because if you are going to stab in the dark, if you accept the framework I was describing earlier about neutral, like at the top, vegetal, agricoles, cachaças, sugarcane juice at one end and pot stills at the other, then if you were going to take a sort of stab in the dark and then start doing a research project up, you want to start smack bang in the middle and a pot column still harmonious blend, which is not too heavy, not too rich, it's not too full, it's not too replete in esters, not too full in higher alcohols. Like that perfect middle ground is the perfect spot. So for example, like if you tasted, I'm going to be total brand, like if you tasted a Dawley's or like a Plantation 5, for example, and you started in the middle of that world and you gave it to a novice and you said you never tasted rum before, we're going to find your perfect rum. If they said that Barbados rum was too heavy for them, too rich, then you might go from Barbados and try somewhere like Trinidadian rums, because Trinidadian rums are column still, but they're much more rich than a typical column still, particularly because they use like a blend of their like heavier components off the column still. So you could taste some of the Angostura. If that was still too heavy for you, you could go even lighter. You could go into a sort of Antiguan rum, into a Cuban rum or Puerto Rican rum, and go to more, without being disrespectful, go towards neutrality, but more crisp and dry and elegant. If similarly they tasted a Barbados rum and they went, oh no, I want something with loads more balls, you could try a pot still Bajan rum. If they wanted even more balls, they could try a really heavy pot still St. Lucian rum. They could try a super rich Guyanese rum. They could try a Jamaican smash mouth high ester rum. Because you could effectively moving down that other axis. And similarly, if they wanted more vegetal notes and they were tequila drinkers, for example, you could take them through Barbancourt, so that sort of syrup rums through to sugarcane juice into clarins and agricoles and cachaças and stuff. Like it all goes back to Jessica's point of like having that framework in your mind. When you understand where rums sit in relation to each other, it allows you to understand that if you like this about that, but you didn't like that, then how about I take you here because I know where that sits in relation to this.
This is why I advocate for mini flights, because I think for a casual drinker who's unaware of what Barbados rum and Jamaican rum and Cuban rum are like, just giving them one rum no matter how good it is, and if I had one rum, it would probably be this one. But just giving them one rum is not going to necessarily equip them with the language or with the ideas of what direction to go after.
But we
On
only
the surface,
disagree because that's always just followed up with the question saying, what do you normally drink? What's your perfect drink? Like, so like Jessica's saying, like having that, what's your favorite drink? What's your favorite spirit type? Gives you that insight so you're not totally stabbing in the dark. Because you and I only disagree. Like you're sort of suggesting taking a total stab in the dark, saying, you know what, I'm just going to like take a scattergun and see if one of these hits the mark.
And what the question brings forth is pretty relevant because, I have a lot of people sit at the bar and they want like a pour of something. And, total rum novice, just pour me something that, I'll probably like. And the Baden rum is a good starting point, I think, for all the reasons Paul just outlined. But also, if I have a straight spirit drinker here in the US, the straight spirit they're drinking is whiskey. And the elements that are going to come out to them as appealing about a rum from Barbados are the same things that they enjoy about whiskey. They're going to like, the rounder, falling sweeter on the palate flavors. They're going to like the age. They're going to like, it makes the guest sound super shallow, but the color is like a huge element. They have something that's like dark from age in front of them. And they're like, oh, this is a good quality spirit.
That's still how people order, remember? Like the most common order from customers, things that I hear from, like I was in a bar today with a great selection of rums, and I asked the bartender, what's your favorite rum? And he said, I really like dark rums. Which immediately, like for someone who really knows rums, like even somebody who really does, like the immediate question is, do you mean the category of rums that are artificial, like have excess caramel and onto bitterness, so therefore Gosling's, Myers, like type realm, which we talk about as dark rums, but really they mean just aged rums, and the fact that like a rum is aged, particularly because we know you can artificially add color to make it look aged, is the most useless descriptor that is imaginable to conceive in a category.
But that's been one of the more delicate soft skills that I have had to develop working with a lesser understood spirit is like, how is the guest going to talk about it? How do I need to interpret that? And how do I respond in a way that makes them feel heard and smart? Because nobody wants to be told, like, oh, you're super into Diplomatico? That's like baby food. Let's go from there. Like, you work with what they want and you give them the experience thereafter, and you want them to leave like excited and wanting more. And hopefully along the way, you can pepper in some vocabulary that will help them out a little bit more in the future. So the next bar that they sit down at, they're equipped with, you know what, I like a rum with a little more age on it.
Yeah. You had really good baby food.
It's also what I would prefer.
Also, Jessica's my damn spirit animal. Like, that was so perfectly put. Because we're talking about this hugely diverse rum category. Like, I described those three axes, but then you also have to recognise that there's without getting three-dimensional. The other axis is like the sort of sweetened, flavoured type category, which you can. It technically isn't rum, right? As in flavor, adding artificial flavors, but it's also a gateway to get people into the category. And so it's one of the reasons why I work for the company I do, and why I've spent most of my adult life doing rum, is that it's such a broad church. It's just about getting people excited about, it doesn't matter where you worship. Like, you like Clarins, amazing. If you like Clarins, then you'll like this. Or similarly, if you like tequila, you will love Clarins and agricoles. Because if you like tequila, you love the taste of the soil, you love the earth, you love the vegetal notes. Wicked. Then come and join the rum church via Clarins and agricoles and cachaças. And if you like vodka, cool. I've got rums that really fucking don't taste of anything at all. Like, I've got another place for you to worship. If you like whiskies, I've got rums that taste like whiskies. And that's the joy of this category. Like, getting people in, getting people excited, and then showing them that like the world of opportunity is that's there for them.
So, Paul, earlier on you mentioned that, you know, when you first started, there was very limited information available compared to what there is today. And, you know, even over the last few years, you know, we've seen more and more information and transparency from different brands coming forward. Like where do you feel it's at? Do we have as much transparency as we'd like from the brands? Is there more to go? What would we like to have from the brands that isn't coming forward yet? And where can we take that forward? Because this has been a big conversation of today, and we've spoken to a lot of you know, independent bottlers and people working with different blends and stuff. And you know, certain information you can disclose and you can't. So how do we, as the people at the forefront, serving the drinks, educating people about rum, introducing to new things, how do we make sure we've got all that information that we need to be able to give the best possible experience? So maybe Gergö, if you want to start off with that, because I know you're at Trailer and you're doing this, so you know, at least a couple of days a week. So what's your experience there?
Well, I'm lucky in the sense that I am privy to a lot of information that the average consumer might not necessarily get. So I can tell people about certain bits of information because either of trainings we've done specifically for the bar team, of research I've done, or from talking to the people actually making these rums. And I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot more transparency nowadays, and a lot of brands are bringing forth a wealth of information that is really for us, you know, that is for us geeks who understand a lot about rum, and it might not be necessarily as useful for the everyday consumer. But on the other hand,
is it a lot of brands though? Is it a lot of brands doing that though?
There's more than 4 years ago. There's more than 3 years ago. There's more than 3 years ago.
Yeah.
As in it's a trend that I see building. But on the other hand, I think it's an educational opportunity that if this disclosure and if this transparency becomes the norm, then it can be something that can help the average consumer understand the category that is really, really difficult to navigate as an outsider. Even as an insider, you know, it's huge and it's complex, and you'll never know everything about it, you know. But I think it's a very positive step, and it's a very important step. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd get to a place, especially with the new EU legislation, we'd get to a place where additives are generally disclosed. Whether people change their opinions based on that or not is almost less important than that they are aware of what it is.
Oh, you could be more right.
We're moving into we're moving into a space where conversation about these things is more open. I know in the past it's been really difficult to pin down, like, what is this brand putting in this bottle? And it's a big mystery, kind of like rum blends have been in the past. But, you know, through social media, through new people coming to the forefront of the industry, I think there is a lot more openness about what's happening behind closed doors. And some of those doors aren't even closed. You know, if you know the right people. It was brought up in the session right before ours how close we are now between like the producer, the distributor, and the guest. Like, you know, some of these people are available just via instant message, and you can ask them, like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? And they're more than happy to share with you. And I think that's super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, like that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Serge's right that it's moving in the right direction as an industry, but we still have this like weird scenario where if you pick up a can of Coke or any other food stuff, it lists all the nutritional information and what is in it. All of the ingredients are on the side of that can or the side of that packet. And of course, when you, without getting all conspiracy theorists, you know that the reason why there isn't nutritional information on the side of a bottle of spirits is because big companies that have lobbyists in their pockets campaign to say, if you put nutritional information or the word nutrition information on the side of a bottle of spirits, what their argument was, their rationale was, if you said nutritional information, it would suggest that spirits were good for you because nutrition is good for you. Therefore, spirits should be exempt. So it's a very facetious argument that no other food industry has had, and because it is just like a misnomer that a bottle of spirits doesn't say what the ingredient list on it is. And where we supply rum to Marks and Spencer's, a big retailer in the UK, and the rums we have to supply on the labelling, it's got a full list of ingredients on it because that's their policy of adoption of what it should be. And in any other world where these like sort of shortcuts haven't been taken, there's in every other food stuff, that would be on every bottle of spirits. And so, yes, the industry is kind of moving towards like self-adopting, educating a bit more, and we are moving in the right direction. But even recently, I went for dinner with an unnamed producer, to be unnamed producer, recently, who I spoke to really passionately during the dinner about how we should talk about the production techniques and how they use their sugar and how they create their blends. And I wasted about 20 minutes doing this whole passion of how we work together. And the guy looked me square in the eye and said, "Yeah, but we don't add any sugar to our rum." I had a delegation over from the Philippines who looked after a very famous flavoured rum from the Philippines, and I did a presentation to them about how we could work together in selling the flavoured rum category. And I was like, let's talk about the provenance and the origin of all the spices and how it's blended and how it's made and all this sort of like, this is how you can do, because the flavoured rum category is fine in its own right, just be really transparent about it. And after a 3/4 of an hour presentation, this Filipino guy looked me in the eye and was like, yeah, but we don't add anything to our rum. and even the people watching this will probably know I'm very rarely speechless, and I'm fucking floored. And eventually it was like, you know what? I'll get my fucking coat.
42 grams of vanillin was it, I think?
Hope I haven't given too many clues of who it was.
Guesses in the comments.
I think it rhymes with John Haha.
So a little bit of work still to be done, but we are moving in the right direction. But we're doing it on a self-compliance type thing where no other food stuff or alcohol stuff has to do it. And long may if the more quickly we can get to the point where everyone has to fucking tell exactly where it came from and what's in it, the better, really.
Yeah. So in that similar vein, then, where rum moves more towards transparency, more explaining what's actually in the bottle as well. Bars themselves and the rum bars that are pushing rum forward and building this culture. And Serge, I know we've talked a little bit about this, but tiki is now hitting a place where we're reevaluating it, where we're moving this forward, and we're re-looking at what tiki culture is, what it could be, what that rum bar is going to look like in the future. And yeah, absolutely. And we've got Chocky joining us later on as well, and I'm fascinated to hear from you guys as well, because my first introduction to rum was at Trailer. That's and it was in its full tiki days back in the day.
Trailer's not a heavy tiki bar with tiki influence.
No, it was never full on, but there's still those connotations around it. I know now Sly and Serge, I know you're looking at a very different concept with it. So I'm interested to hear from each of you, where you see tiki at, has it served its purpose? Is it to evolve? Are we throwing it away completely and getting something else in? Serge, what's your thoughts on this?
I think, and this is a conversation I think I've had with all three of you at various points. It needs to face up to its cultural baggage. It needs to, Tiki as a subculture and Tiki as a group needs to face up to its cultural baggage, needs to shed the problems that are inherent to it and find an alternative that it can present as itself. And that goes down to how you interpret Tiki. If Tiki is about complex, delicious drinks and providing escapism and providing something that is not your everyday boring gray world, then there's no reason why it has to caricature and appropriate cultures that already have centuries worth of various colonial problems and lots and lots of problems with their representation in everything from popular media and mass culture and popular culture to how people in tiki bars and tiki events interpret them. And if we can do that, then that's how I see tiki developing, and that's how I see it going forward. And there are a bunch of people, there are a bunch of voices, thankfully more and more voices from the actual cultures that tiki has affected, leading this charge. And I think supporting and amplifying these voices is how us in bars and us coming from privileged backgrounds can help tiki change into something that is sustainable and inclusive and welcoming.
Awesome. And Jessica?
I mean, we have been having these discussions just like ongoing over the last few years, but especially in the last year for me, being introduced to a lot of other professionals who are working in the category. I think there's a lot of value here, and I think that it's a great platform for a lot of new bartenders to come in and bring their creativity to the table. The imagery that has been associated with it previously is irrelevant to the cocktail culture now. You don't need that stuff. I feel like we can leave it. The discussions that we're having about, how it's been problematic in the past and how it's a bummer now are really important. I'm glad we're having them, and they make it okay. And they open doors for people to take this category, to take this style and to move it into, the next phase. I've really loved seeing young bartenders, people of color, women come into this category and use it to flex what they've got. It's really, really cool.
It's a really good point. That, I suppose where I'd sort of add to that is that that I've always taken a much broader view of tiki in terms of I've always looked at it in terms of what's at the core of tiki. This conversation rages daily on the real tiki forums about, is this totem tiki or is it something else? Because you're right, tiki is that appropriation of the Polynesian ideal, but from my point of view, the most important legacy of that Donna Beachcomber and then popularized by Trader Vic ideal was rooted in escapism, theatrics, but then using the versatility of rum to create flavors that didn't exist in individual bottles, and exoticism and theatre and escapism in the drinks themselves. And so somewhere like Lucky Cane, for example, or a lot of the sort of new wave of tiki bars wouldn't pass any mustard as tiki establishments. And someone like Lucky Cane doesn't even pretend to, because they will say we're a tropical bar. But what they've done is taken the core pillars that made what was the tiki legacy so enduring, that escapism, the fact that you walk into that bar and you were transported to another world. The hospitality was amazing. The theatre in the drink service, the theatre of the experience of the food and how and the service, combined with the fact that it's a movement that really understands the broad palette of rum and uses it to create beautiful, like big paintings that can't be achieved with any one rum or any simple cocktail. And so, just for, like the cultural appropriation aspect of tiki, I'm not like underplaying at all, because obviously there's a cartoonish aspect of how they've appropriated cultures, but the legacy of what might be called the sort of the tiki movement, I personally, I don't think it ever existed, or it did at the time, but now it doesn't exist, just purely within that that imagery and that like pure isolationist position, that I'm much more interested in the applications of that. And I've always said, Mitch, you'll know, like the first trip I did around Australia for a month, the title of my presentations was every good bar has a little bit of tiki in it. In that, my argument was, if you walk into a sports bar, a speakeasy, like a great restaurant, that if the core pillars of escapism and theatre and hospitality and understanding your ingredients to create something which is grand and feeds that escapism and theatrics, should underpin every damn good hospitality establishment. And tiki is kind of the catch-all title that I use for it. But you're right, purists would use that for that Polynesian appropriation, and there are undeniably issues within that. In like creating sort of cartoonish representations of what was a like centuries old traditions. Like,
I've always liked saying, like, I like to bring a little tiki to everything that I do behind a bar.
that's the coolest thing anyone's ever said.
I mean, it's a fun word, and to me, stepping into the tiki world was the thing that made me really take charge of who I was behind a bar. The guy that sort of taught me tiki, this guy in Seattle, his name's Toshi. He kind of took me through everything that he learned and like how he used it as a palette to bring his creativity to the table, and ultimately just to have fun. It is fun. That's what rum is supposed to be. And to me, for a long time, especially like working with another bartender of color, when he and I were behind the bar together, you know, we didn't need those other elements, and we were bringing a really cool thing to people. And it was a really nice introduction to an entire category of cocktailing that introduced me to the dopest people I have ever met. And I really love the idea that the people who are involved with this movement are now really open to discussing why it's been sort of a bummer in certain ways in the past, how we can address that now, and how we can all move forward and have a super dope time together.
Do you have a price if I start a GoFundMe to bring you to London?
Yes, if anybody wants
is there
out of this COVID hellhole, I am absolutely yours.
I'm here, like.
I think we'll find plenty of people who will pitch in.
100%.
No, and I think, you know, it is such an important conversation there, and I think, you know, one of the points you made as well, Paul, is it's become this catch-all term. There's so much tied in with it, you know, like on one aspect it's escapism, on one aspect it also ties in this cultural appropriation, on one aspect it's just plain sexist. Like there's so many different levels depending on what version of tiki you want to take. And
yes.
You know, and even the word itself, even the term itself, tiki, you know, having its own cultural heritage. And we have to sort of separate all these bits out and go, what were the bits we actually liked about it?
Yes.
And as you said, Jessica, you know, it's the fact that, well, when we walked into that bar, we just had a fucking great time, and 100%. Everyone was really fun, and we drank rum, and all the cocktails were delicious, and those are the bits we liked. So how do we save that, make that even better, and get rid of all the shit parts? You know, and that I think will hopefully be, for me at least, that will hopefully be the next era of tiki that we're going to see rolled out around the world. So,
well, I suppose that's the sidestep that places like Trailer Happiness and Lackey Kane, like that next generation of bars have done, that where you can walk into Trailer and not see like totems, like culturally appropriated totems, and like similarly in something like Lackey Kane, where nothing on any of their marketing or any of their stuff their guests have even mentioned the word tiki. It's about tropical, and obviously it's different, but the underpinnings about escapism, theatre, fun, magical hospitality experiences, and bring it back to the thing we're talking about today, that using the palette that Don and Trader gave us to create beautiful artistic cocktails and drinks. Like it just doesn't exist anywhere else, and that's why every good bar needs a goddamn piece of tiki in it.
Yeah, I mean, tropical is
agree.
yeah, tropical is one way. The other way is, and this is a bar that I bring up as an example a lot, Inferno Room in Indiana. What they have done is that they work with a lot of Pacific artists to create all their decor and create basically the interior of their bar. They work with actual Pacifica people to create something that is culturally appreciative rather than appropriative. And and if you show cultural appreciation rather than appropriation, then you can use things that won't be offensive but still provide you with this feeling of escapism and this feeling of being transported into somewhere else without the unsavory and horrible aspects of it. Amplifying the right voices.
Really, Mitch, we need to be buying that tiki bar in Barbados, Mitch. And sorry, Jessica, go.
Oh, I was just thinking amplifying diverse voices is such a cool part of what modern tropical drinks are to me. Using that term, that's the name of a book by Shannon Mustafer. She is a woman involved in this movement who kind of showed me, like, it's okay to be whoever you are and come to the table here, because you don't necessarily need to fit any kind of an image. That actually runs counter to what this cocktail trend is about. It's really cool that it's a little bit of an anything goes kind of category, because, sure, there is a traditional image here, and, it's been propagated by, certain types of people over time and has been made successful by them. But now the people who are taking the reins of it are taking the fact that you can take this beautiful, diverse palette of rum and apply it in so many different ways, and then take spice and take bitter and take tropical, and you can make whatever you want. It's so cool and exciting.
100%. And that's why, as I was saying, Mitch, we need to just buy that tiki bar outside the bar outside the house in Barbados, and just do that, and just ship in all our friends to run it. Like, I know Miguel will have something to say about that. So Miguel from Mount Gay, like, that's his beach. That's where he grew up. And I think he's got designs on that bar. But, like, there's a tiki bar, like, directly opposite our, like, the house that we own in Barbados. And it's just screaming for us to turn it into just a really cool hangout for the homies, like, in Barbados.
Jessica will come.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys are definitely the crew I want to be there working at it with. So.
Yeah. I just need a price. I'll get people to donate.
But just on that final note, just as we're finishing up the session, and Sergio, I think you summed it up really nicely there, where you said, switching that cultural appropriation to cultural appreciation. And I think that's, where we're hopefully heading with the rum world as a whole, and using, we have a huge opportunity in the rum world to highlight and give massive love to all these countries and highlight the provenance of these amazing rum producing countries. And I think we have the opportunity to do that in our rum bars as well. So, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this session. It was so wonderful to talk to all of you. And
are you leaving now? Are we going to carry on till? Are you leaving now? Are we carrying on till 10 a.m.?
I mean, I'll see you in less than 2 hours anyway.
Well,
We're welcoming Dawn Davies back in the room, back in the red dress. So
I love the transition into
Wow.
night.
Well, I promised Maggie that I would come dressed in evening wear for her session. So
You've stolen Mitch's outfit, though.
I've got nothing to wear now. So.
No, guys, it was super interesting. I was listening in the background, and when I did disappear there, it's because in 24 hours a girl's got to pee.
Thank you so much for putting this together. Like,
thank you so much, guys.
You couldn't have put together two people that I would like to do this more for a start, and also I'm really in awe of what you've done. To go back to what I was saying at the start, this is so important for the wider industry, so Mitch and I have obviously worked really closely together for a number of years now, and Mitch, now you're the master.
Don't know about that. There's still endless amounts to learn. I just looked at today and I was listening to the sessions going, yeah, I know nothing. Let's start. But hopefully there's lots for everyone to take away from today. But thank you so much, guys. We will see you very soon. I'll see you at Trailer tomorrow.
Yeah, you will.